right, good morning. I will call our Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority April meeting to order. We have one item from the chairman, and that is a rider survey, and I'm going to move that, if you'll let me, to just before the items for individual consideration, because I've asked Brent Bryant to come over and explain one of the consent docket items. But do we have any citizens to be heard? Not yet. Do we have any citizens to be heard? If not, then I would have a motion to approve our minutes of the March 6th meeting. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, we've got 5 items on our consent docket. I'm going to, item E, have an explanation of that, but items A, B, C, and D, are there any of those that trustees would like any discussion on? And if not, well, I'll hold approval for the consent docket till we get them all. Second. All in favor? Opposed? All right. Item E is a consideration of adoption of a joint resolution with the City of Oklahoma City and the Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust approving the amendment to the Century Center Mixed-Use Redevelopment Program Economic Development Agreement. And I asked Brent Bryant, the Economic Development Program Manager for the city, if he could come and enlighten us on that. I didn't understand it.
Yes, sir. The amendment before you today has to do with the minimum tax payment that the developer is required to pay as a result of receiving TIF. And since this body was a party to the contract, we felt like we needed to come back and get your approval for that. But essentially what it is initially when we did this agreement, we anticipated that the county would send out invoices to the developer if their taxes initially were not up to the minimum level that was required of them. The county has elected not to do that, so we needed to amend the contract to make it where the developer has to pay the Economic Development Trust the difference on their annual minimum tax. And then we also had covenants that are tied to the property, and we had to amend those to reflect that process in which, when they make their payments, their annual tax payments, that we have the ability to send them invoices for the difference between, if there is a difference. So we get at least the minimum tax requirements, so we can recoup all the TIF dollars that we have invested in the project.
Well, this payment reschedule in here, and I don't know if you know which one what it is. Is that the actual, I mean, if we don't know for sure what the amount that the ad valorem tax will pay off, how do we know?
No, sir. What we did initially is when we looked at the cash flows of the property and anticipated the value of the property, we identified and created these various minimum tax payments, and these are what they will have to pay. And for example, in 2015, if the county sends them a bill for $160,000, we will send them a bill for $24,200 to make up the gap. Now, if the county sends them a TIF bill for $200,000, we will not be sending them a bill. It's just
so that does include the TIF repayment.
Yes, this is the way that we get the TIF dollars repaid back to. Yes.
So there's no real impact on the Transportation Authority?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Well,
You were a party to the contract, so we could provide $1 million worth of TIF assistance to the Cotpa garages in the form of $900,000 went to improvements at the Century Center project, and then an additional $100,000 is going to the parking system to help with other repairs that you're making throughout your system.
Then what was the incentive? Was over $2 million.
The incentive is approximately $1.25 million in development assistance with an $800,000 low interest loan, and then there was the $1 million that was provide assistance to the Cotpa system.
Okay. It makes it a little clearer. Not completely, but any other questions of Brent? All right, thank you for coming over. I appreciate it. All right, do I hear a motion to approve item E on our consent docket? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. All right, items for individual consideration. First item is approval of a contract with McNatt and Company for tenant build-out of the Arts District parking garage.
Good morning.
Morning.
On February 6th, as you remember, we put out an RFP for the retail build-out of the Arts District garage, which included Phase 1, which included the Oklahoma City Health Clinic, the Conference Center, common areas, also for a coffee shop, and Oklahoma City Public School Foundation. And we received 4 bids, W.L. McNatt and Company being the lowest bid at $2,005,000. So today we're asking that you approve that we can go ahead and go on with the retail build-out.
All right. Any questions? Do I hear a motion to approve item A?
Move the item.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. I forgot that I had moved the item from the chairman, the rider survey results, so why don't we go ahead and do that now, and then we'll get to the rest of the items for individual consideration.
Thank you all for having me. I'm John Tankard. I work in the planning department, and I'm here, as you said, to show the results to a ridership survey that we conducted in partnership with Cotpa and with practicum support from the University of Oklahoma College of Public Health. Thanks to everybody on the board, Jason, staff, for having us and helping us through this process, and happy to show what we found. So the main reason the planning department had an interest in doing a survey was because of the major transition from Metro Transit to the Embark system. The changes with the route alignment, the frequency, rebranding, all of these obviously are going to have an impact on riders, and we were interested to see what that impact actually was. And so we conducted a survey between July and August of 2014, and the system changes occurred in April 2014. So we thought that it would be fresh in their minds still, but they would have enough experience with the changes to actually have an opinion formed. So here's the survey that we used. It's a one-page document. We wanted it to be, as accessible as possible to the people on the bus. We surveyed 600 riders on the major routes, so that's all the routes except for the Downtown Discovery and the Sooner Express. And we distributed it evenly among those routes, so it was 30-plus surveys per route. We did the survey between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. on weekdays, and we had about a 20% refusal rate with the surveys, and that was either due to requesting compensation or apprehension of giving out information. The questions are related to demographics, accessibility, satisfaction, and riding habits or behavior, and we also had this survey in Spanish for the Hispanic ridership. So I'll start with the demographic results and just kind of move through those. This portion of the presentation will show the results for system-wide statistics, whereas some of the questions later on will have a breakdown by route. So on your screens, I'm sure it's a little clearer. This is a map of all the zip codes of the respondents. And you'll notice that there is not an area where the transit lines are not over a zip code with a respondent, which could indicate that if you provide transit, people are going to use it in that area. We had 40 zip codes represented, and 2 of them, 73111 and 73106, which are the dark ones up there, accounted for 25% of riders surveyed. Let's see. So moving on, looking at the age of the riders, it's a fairly evenly spread age group from 1929 to 2000, and the average age is 44, born in 1970. In terms of gender, 57% identified as male, 43% female. This is actually somewhat different than most systems around the country. A recent City Lab article indicated that most systems have a leaning towards female riders, about the same split but opposite of Embark. In terms of race and ethnicity, there were a few racial groups that were overrepresented and a few that were underrepresented. African Americans and Native Americans were overrepresented on the transit system, while white and Hispanic riders were underrepresented. This could be due to where the routes go or other factors. The average household size for riders of Embark is slightly lower than the citywide average. Citywide average is around 2.5. On the bus, it was between 2.2 and 2.3. So this could be an opportunity to market towards families or try to get larger family units to utilize the bus. This statistic was probably one of the most interesting from the survey, that 3 in 4 riders surveyed do not have access to a single motor vehicle, and only 1 in 10 riders have access, are in a household with more than one motor vehicle. So that just kind of illustrates their reliance on the system and how important it is to provide sufficient access to their daily needs. In fact, none of the routes had less than 50% of riders without access to a car. In terms of education, less than half of the riders surveyed had any sort of college education, and these numbers are don't track with the citywide averages. They're out of sync as well. In terms of employment, less than half of the riders surveyed are currently employed. Unemployment rate was 32%, which is about 7 times greater than the citywide average. A quarter of riders were retired or students. And household income was very low. It was interesting to see, or it's possible that some people misinterpreted this question as a monthly income as opposed to a yearly income. However, based on the percentage of people that chose the lowest option, there are, the consideration for low-income riders is fairly profound, and the dependence on transit is quite evident. So, moving on, these questions are related to rider habits, with consideration to frequency, accessibility, and the reasons that people ride the bus. So this first slide shows how frequently people ride the bus, and more than half, or exactly half of the riders surveyed ride the bus virtually every day. 90% of the riders ride the bus at least once a week, so the majority of riders use this system quite a bit. But you will notice that when we did the survey, 2% of the people surveyed, it was their first time riding, and I think this correlates with the increase in ridership that Jason's been presenting month over month. In terms of how people get to their bus stop, overwhelmingly, almost everybody walks or uses a wheelchair or whatever. They're not using a vehicle. So the importance of the accessibility at bus stops can't be overstated, whether that's sidewalks or ADA accessibility. These types of things are essential for the majority of riders. In terms of how people pay for the bus, the greatest percentage pay for the bus using cash, though 60% of people use some form of a pass. We know that when people use cash, it slows the system down because of having to input all their money at the front of the bus. And so finding ways that we can kind of decrease people's reliance on cash would be a positive step. And I think it probably has a lot to do with the idea of putting up, $50 at one time versus $175 at one time. Cash is a much more viable option in the moment. In terms of why people ride the bus, more than half of the riders said that it was because it's their only option. And a lot of people responded that it's because of convenience or to save money, but it was nice to see that about 1 in 10 riders ride the bus because they think that it's better for the environment. The fact that, or the last option only had 1% that their job pays for bus fare, so that shows that there's an opportunity to reach out to private and public sector to maybe find ways to have transit passes be an alternative to parking or something like that. These next three questions are related to public health. Since I worked with a practicum student from OU College of Public Health, we wanted to include questions about accessibility to healthy foods, physical activity, and healthcare facilities. And this graph shows that with the transition to Embark, nearly two-thirds of riders feel that they have better access to grocery stores, which, whether it's true or not, the perception is the important part, and it's nice to see that people feel that maybe the frequency has increased their ability to get to and from grocery stores. And this map shows that of the 35 supermarkets that are within the Oklahoma City limits, 29 of them are within a 5-minute walk of a bus route. So the coverage is fantastic in that regard. The next question is related to healthcare facilities, and you'll notice the not applicable answer on here is higher than the last one, and I've interpreted that as to mean that this is not what these respondents were using the system for, so 1 in 3. However, more than half of riders feel they have better access to healthcare facilities now than they did before with the Metro Transit system. And this map shows that of the roughly 600 healthcare facilities in the city, two-thirds of them are within a 5-minute walk of the transit of a transit route. So, again, very good coverage there. And on this question, with regard to physical activity, more people replied that it's not applicable to their use of transit than replied that it had improved their accessibility. And so from a public health perspective and with the focus on obesity and diabetes and things like this that we're trying to make improvements on, that may be an opportunity to find ways to encourage people to use the bus to get to physical activity opportunities, whether that's parks or gyms, trails. And this map shows that along the transit routes, the majority of parks are on a transit route, but the large recreation facilities such as Lake Hefner, Lake Overholser, Lake Draper, Stinchcombe, Martin Nature Reserve, they're not immediately accessible by transit. So that may be something for long-term consideration. This last section of the survey is questions related to satisfaction, both with the service as it exists as well as with relation to the transition from Metro Transit to Embark. And in order to evaluate the routes in comparison to each other as well as satisfaction level of different demographic groups, we did a weighted average so that we could actually rank these in terms of satisfaction level. So these are the 7 questions that were a part of this weighted sum. And on the right, you can see how all these routes, all the routes that we surveyed compare to one another. At the bottom is the highest score, which equates to the highest level of satisfaction. At the top is the lowest average level of satisfaction for the riders surveyed. So I'm just going to go through these real quick. The first question being, the bus takes me where I need to go. 75% of riders agree with this, meaning that where we're giving them access to right now is meeting most of their daily needs. And 3 out of 4 riders agree with this, and that's a really great statistic. Only 1 in 10 disagrees. And you can see the breakdown here. Routes 22, 40, and 38 are performing very well on this scale. In terms of the buses being on time, 2/3 of riders agree that the buses are on time, and while 2 out of 10 disagree with this. And so this isn't performing quite as well as the first question, but it's still overwhelmingly positive. And with this breakdown, you can start to see which routes are performing more efficiently. That may give an opportunity to look at how we can improve timeliness on the routes that scored the lowest on this scale.
John, if you don't mind.
Sure.
When was this survey conducted?
It was late July and August 2014.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I know we've had a substantial effort towards timeliness. And
Absolutely.
hopefully the next time we do this, we'll see that, that measure improve.
Yeah, and that's one of the benefits of doing this sort of weighted sum analysis is if we do it again year over year, we can quantitatively see how it's improving. And while it's not, exactly certain that this is representative of performance, it does show satisfaction, which is definitely tied to performance. In terms of driver customer service, 3 out of 4 riders agreed that the drivers are courteous and helpful, and only 1 in 10 disagreed with this. And again, the survey being roughly 9 months old at this point, drivers have probably changed from buses, but it just gives you an idea of which routes are most satisfied with customer service at this point in time. In terms of cleanliness, again, 3 out of 4 riders agree that the buses are clean. Only 1 in 10 disagree. The routes that scored the lowest on this scale, it might be worth looking at ways to address cleanliness. It could be that these routes have higher numbers of ridership and just by the nature of that concept get dirtier. So maybe there's some way to improve that. Safety actually scored the highest on in terms of satisfaction. 85% of riders said that they feel safe riding the bus. Only 1 in 20 disagree with this statement. And in terms of non-riders, the obstacles we face in trying to get people to ride the bus, this one comes up a lot, that people think that maybe riding the bus is dangerous or that drivers are not friendly or that the buses are dirty. But the results of these questions kind of indicate that that's probably more of a myth than based in reality. And here you can see.
Before we move on,
Yes.
I would just like to comment on that. I agree with your conclusion that it's just a perception, and those who have tried riding the bus do feel safe and comfortable once they get on the bus, as well as, at the various bus stops. So that's, I think, is an issue we've got to work on, is the perception.
Yeah. And
Thank you.
How we address that is obviously, there are many ways we can address that, but it's a conversation we should definitely progress forward with. And so here, some of the routes scored lower. It might be worth addressing, looking along the route. Maybe there are areas where these routes go through places that could use more lighting. Just find ways that we can address safety on the routes. This question kind of suffers from the fact that people who ride the bus all the time know when they need to get to the bus stop, and so they don't wait any longer now than they did when the system ran hourly as opposed to half-hourly. However, 6 in 10 riders said that they agree that they wait less for the bus, so I think this added frequency has improved current riders' perceptions of how long they have to wait for the bus. And if a bus, for some reason, was out of sync, there's going to be one more frequently now, so it kind of gives a little bit of insurance towards this consideration. Routes that scored low on this, it could be due to the route not changing very much. So answering no to or that they disagree with this question doesn't necessarily mean that they spend more time, just that they aren't spending less time. And finally, just a straightforward question: what is your impression of the route changes? We gave an option for people who don't ride the bus enough to actually have an opinion, or maybe they just started riding after Embark started. So 1 out of 10 chose that option. But if you look at the remaining group, roughly 2/3 of the people who had an opinion feel that the system is either much better or a little bit better than before. So, with the increase in ridership numbers and statistics like this, I think we found in the survey that the transition to Embark was an overwhelming success. And here you can see the routes that perform better or worse in that regard. So last, I just want to talk about some things that came out of this survey. I've already touched on these, and just some ideas that will, increase rider satisfaction and hopefully increase ridership. So improving bus stop accessibility, I think we all know that that's a priority, and with, finding the right funding sources and things like that is essential to making those improvements. We're already making improvements with new shelters going around the city, and I think that's a great direction to be heading. Increasing service availability. If you noticed on the survey, there was a section for open comments, and the most common responses were Sunday service and evening service. Since the survey, we've added 2 routes to the evening. So I think we're already addressing that need, and if we continue to do that in the future, that's going to be a positive step. Further improvement to the routes. The Nelson-Nagard study obviously made the routes more efficient, but there are certain routes that are performing better than others. Route 22 is a very simple route. It just goes out 4th Street up MLK and back. And that one scored very highly on a lot of categories. So maybe the design is easy to understand for a lot of people, and so people are more spatially aware in the city, and so that might be why it's performing so well. Decreasing the reliance on cash for fares, I think there are many ways we can address that. Probably very small changes, maybe to the pricing scale, but to be able to get people to use cash less will make our buses more timely, which will increase rider satisfaction, which can lead to higher ridership. Increasing directed marketing strategies. So based on the fact that we could attract more families, we could encourage people that riding the bus is a positive thing for the community. 10% of people were interested in the benefit to the environment. Maybe there's an ad campaign in that. Maybe we could explain the amount of money they're saving by choosing to ride the bus as opposed to driving the car. Improving the experience for key groups. So the weighted average aspect for routes, we also conducted that for demographic groups, and 3 groups came out as being less satisfied than others. That was young riders, riders that had higher than average incomes for the survey group, and then those who rode the bus most frequently. And that was an interesting thing, that it trended, the more frequently you ride the bus, the lower your overall satisfaction level was with the system. And that was sort of perplexing, but there may be a way to address that. I already mentioned this, engaging with employers to offer transit services. For future surveys, and I know there's one going on, or it's in the planning stages right now, could include questions and methods from this survey. Maybe we could go ahead and build that into this reoccurring survey and learn from it. And then lastly, kind of shameless plug, to work with the planning department, because we, especially with Plan OKC in its final stages, we have a lot of interest in how transit can help support our goals, and vice versa, how our ideas through Plan OKC could help improve the transit system. And that's all. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Yeah. So what is our plan for frequency? We mentioned that we've got a survey that's in planning stages right now. Is that to duplicate this and continue this, or is that separate?
It'll be a more robust survey than this, and the survey that we are working on now will look at not only riders but citizens of Oklahoma. So it's kind of a customer survey and a citizen survey about the transit system. And then we'll move what our plan is each year we'll survey our customer base. Every other year we'll do a customer and kind of citizen or community survey.
Okay.
And I think that's really important, because that safety issue, for example, that was mentioned, we believe that we know, but it's anecdotal, that people are afraid to ride the bus. And I think if we could get some true evidence of that from the survey, then we have a better idea of what things we need to address as we move forward. I mean, we're already addressing some of these things, and I'm really kind of excited about that. I know your new cash register system, for example, will give us some opportunities for selling passes without cash, and maybe there's an opportunity for us to also consider whether or not we want to sell weekly passes, or something to address that cash availability versus the monthly pass purchase.
And we do offer currently 7-day passes and daily passes in addition to the monthly that John had mentioned.
But will we have passes available now? For example, if you ride a transit system in Boston, you can put your card in the machine and buy the pass right there. You don't have to go to a special location. There are many more places that you can buy a pass. Is that contemplated?
I don't think we haven't got that far to where we have not considered buying like a monthly pass, for example, on the bus at this point. It's something we could certainly look at.
One other question. On the open comments, was there an attempt to try to quantify? I know it's difficult when you leave open comments, but sometimes you can see where you can kind of categorize certain areas where you see common comments, that kind of a common theme. Did we attempt to do that?
Well, I mean, I took them from the surveys and put them into a spreadsheet, but really the ones that I mentioned, that the Sunday service, night service, I'd say a third of them really just wrote those two things down.
Okay.
There were other things.
So the recommendations then pulled in a combination of
Right.
kind of interpreting the responses as well as comments that were made.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and other ones were related to, I mean, a lot of them were more personal than kind of broad. They weren't really broad enough. So rather than
There's
including-
something like the driver on Route 7 is not friendly to me, or...
Exactly that. Yes.
For the record, I just made that up.
All right, any other questions? David?
Let me take a stab at that issue about the people who use the bus the most have the least satisfaction. If those tend to be the ones that don't have any other form of transportation, and unfortunately they're at the lower extremes of income, they really don't have too much to compare the ride on the bus with. Now, for those who have access to other forms of transportation, just talking from personal experience, I can see the benefits of riding the bus monetarily, environmentally, just the enjoyment of not having to be concerned with what's going on with the traffic and how am I going to maneuver through all of this. So that may be perhaps a reason why their level of satisfaction is the lowest, because they don't have an opportunity to compare what it would be like if they had to drive all the time. So just wanted to throw that out there. But it is hopeful. Again, I think this survey confirms what I fear is that we are reaching a segment of our population that the bus service is the only means of transportation. And somehow, with Michael and the other marketing individuals, we need to convince people that this is a good way to get to work, especially if you work in the downtown area or an area that's easily accessible by a bus service. So I think our efforts should be to convince people who don't have to ride the bus to consider riding it, and I think just a combination of focusing on the benefits may help with respect to that, as well as that perception of not being safe. Thank you.
I might add, the people who ride the bus the most are most likely to encounter some sort of bad experience, too. So that may linger more than the good experiences. So that could decrease their satisfaction as well.
What limited park and ride do we have now? I mean,
We don't have any official park and rides in the system right now.
But informally, we've got plenty of opportunities to, like I do, I'll drive to the closest bus stop, park my car in a public parking lot, and never have had any problems or any comments or anything like that. So I think we have an informal park and ride system in place, given the location of bus stops and things like that.
And, one quick comment, too, on the attracting new riders to the system, or marketing to attract new riders. I do know, and Michael will probably speak to that more later, but as part of our night service awareness campaign, if you'll recall, I believe last month he had mentioned that we're actually kind of have that campaign divided into two parts, getting the message out to our existing riders and then also marketing to new riders. And so I think, too, the survey results indicating, John, I think the number was maybe 24% of the survey respondents were new to the system or did not ride the bus regularly. But anyway, it seemed like there was a decent percentage of new riders to the system, and I think that'll be something that will help us gauge how we're doing in that respect, and we'll continue to ask that question in future surveys.
all right, any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you very
Very informative. We appreciate it. Do we need to receive that report, or? I don't think we do. Okay. Item B on our individual consideration is a contract with the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company for tire leasing service. You might make a brief mention of that.
Yeah, item 6B is, as you mentioned, a contract with Goodyear Tire and Rubber for our tire leasing services. The contract is over a 5-year term. As you'll recall, last month the board approved an extension of the existing contract while we finished the analysis of the bids and looking at the different costs. And so I'm pleased to report that work has been completed, and it was determined that Goodyear had the lowest and best bid at approximately $224,000 annually in estimated costs, or about $1.12 million estimated over the 5-year life of the contract.
If there's no questions, do I hear a motion to approve item B? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Item C is consideration of approval of the final acceptance to the contract with Downey Contracting for steel beam coating project in the Century Center parking garage and place the maintenance bond into effect.
Yes, this is the contract with Downey that was awarded in December. This, if you remember, was to take off the fireproofing and to clean up the beams and repaint them in the -2 level at the Century Center. The work has been completed and has been approved. We had one change order, which increased it by $961. So the final project was $275,361.70, and so we ask that you approve final acceptance and place maintenance bonds in effect.
Okay, and while you're on that, I guess Century Center is open for business and
Yes, we are still moving, not due to our construction, due to construction going on in the facility. We've slowly been moving our customers back in, the parkers. We still have some at the Cox, but we're not running the shuttle anymore.
okay.
So,
Any questions? If not, do I hear a motion to approve item C? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Item D is consideration of approval of change order number 11 to the contract with Flintco for the Arts District parking garage.
yes, change order 11 consists of 2 items. The first one was to fabricate a stainless steel separation rail. This was identified by the City of Oklahoma City, the ADA compliance. There was a small step in the walkway, and so they wanted a rail there for ADA compliance. So that was created, and then also they were asked to paint the actual door to match the granite. It was a white door, and it just kind of really stood out, so we've asked them to paint that to match the granite. So that was a total of $6,780. I don't want to say that this is the last one, because we don't know, but I think we're really, really close.
How about our corridor now? I mean, I haven't been over there. Is all our art up, or?
No, the art is still being fabricated with installations scheduled sometime in July.
All right. No questions on item D. Do I hear a motion to approve? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Item C is approval to participate in the City of Oklahoma City's Oklahoma Standard Initiative employee activities. Jason, would you like to make a quick mention of that?
Yes, item 6E will authorize Cotpa to participate in the city's Oklahoma Standard Initiative program. As you're probably aware, the Oklahoma Standard Initiative is in the program honoring the 20th anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing. And the program is about encouraging service, honor, and an act of kindness. And so what this will allow is for Cotpa employees to participate in an act of service, time away from work with the approval of their supervisor, to serve at one of the city's recreation centers. Also, it allows for, with the approval of their supervisor, time away from work to conduct an act of honor, which would be visiting the Memorial Museum, and then encourages employees to perform an act of kindness to their coworker, neighbor, friend. And so, with approval, this will open this up for COP employees to participate as well.
just wanted to add, the city manager has really been talking a lot about this. One of the things that is remarkable, especially for those of us who are of a certain age, we remember that day as if it were yesterday sometimes. We have to recognize that there are so many new people in Oklahoma City, new residents, new employees, who may not remember that day and need to be reminded of what our standard is in responding to our friends, our neighbors, and even strangers in a moment of need like that. So that's one of the reasons that this initiative is so important. Some of us may need a refresher rather than a reminder, but many people may not even be aware of, they're certainly aware of the bombing as a historical event, but they're not aware of our community's response to it, and that's what this is about.
Boy, last night on the news, one of the news stations was recounting some of it, and they had President Clinton when he was here, and his comments about Oklahoma, and boy, they sure hit home. I mean, how sincere he was about the Oklahoma attitudes. All right, do I hear a motion to approve item E? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Final item is consideration of approval of task order number 22 with Triad Design for the installation of fire sprinkler system at the South May Maintenance Garage.
Item 6F, as you mentioned, the task order with Triad. If you'll recall, back in the fall of 2014, November actually, we completed the expansion of the bus maintenance facility out at 2000 South May. And that expansion project allows us now to be able to pull two 40-foot buses into the shop to work on at the same time in a single bay. Well, with the completion of that expansion project, the total square footage of the facility now puts it in that range where a sprinkler system is required. And so we knew that upon final acceptance of the project back in the fall that we would have to put this sprinkler system in. This project is approved in the 5-year capital plan that was approved in July by the trustees. And so this action here will allow us to begin moving forward on that project by having Triad manage the project and put together the bid documents for us so we can bid the work.
All right. Thank you, Jason. No questions. I hear a motion to approve item F. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Next item is ratification in claims and payroll for the period March 1st through March 31st, 2015.
Move approval.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Next is Cotpa scheduled revenues, a budget to actual for the 8 months ended. And Jason, if there's any items you'd like to highlight.
Thank you. I'd like to look at each one of the financial statements for transportation parking in the river. We can take a quick look at them. Starting on page 2, this is the budget to actual for the transportation division. Pretty similar story in what we saw last month. In terms of revenues, our revenue that's received from passengers continues to perform over target. To date, we're at $65,000 more in revenue than what we had budgeted. That's driven primarily by fare box and ticket sales, and it's consistent really with just about where we were at this time last month. We were at 103.7% of our budget. We're at 103.5%, so we continue that trend. Looking at the federal grant revenue, you'll notice that we are $430,000 under on our actual grant revenue received versus what we had estimated or budgeted. And if you'll recall, I had mentioned this previously, but we had delayed drawing a reimbursement for some of our paratransit expenses as we were working through trying to close out some old grants. We've since took that reimbursement. We've been able to draw those funds, but in looking at some of the savings we have down in our expenditures, particularly in our salary savings, rather than allocating that federal grant draw, which is a reimbursement, back back to our operating budget to support operating expenses, we've allocated that to our capital account, so we have local match for projects such as bus replacement. So what you're going to see is consistently, probably from here on out through the remainder of the year, because we have that flexibility, showing that federal grant reimbursement on the operating side under budget. In terms of other revenues, these other categories are pretty much in line again with where we were last month. The last line there under the revenue section, the other revenues, that includes our advertising revenue, and we are essentially about $18,000 over for the year in that category, down from about $35,000 over last month. But again, most of that, even though we're still over in that category, the fact that we've dropped off a little bit is due to the timing of a payment from one of our advertisers. So I would expect that to increase when we're looking at this in May. On the operating expenditure side, again, I mentioned this, but we continue to have some savings on our personnel costs. Part of that is due to the fact that we have 11 vacancies. So you'll notice we're at 91% of our budget, or at this point we're about $970,000 under what we had initially projected on personnel costs. But keep in mind that's due to vacancies, but then also the pay plan adjustments that were approved with the union are not reflected in these numbers. So again, as those increases are applied, we'll start seeing our personnel expenses catch up to our budget probably rather quickly over the next couple of months. And then, yes, sir.
Tell me again on the federal grants now. The financials make it look like we've not applied for the federal grants and we're under, but you say we have applied, but we've allocated that money.
Right. The grant revenue is on a reimbursement basis, so we incur kind of think of it like this, in that we incur the expense, we turn in our receipt for our expenses, and we receive the money back. And generally, we will put all that money back into our operating budget to support ongoing expenses. In this case, rather than putting it back into our operating budget, we just put it over into our capital account. So we still receive the reimbursement and applied for the funds that were due to us under the grant.
It looks like we would need not an accountant, but it looks like we'd need some footnotes to that effect or something. So we don't go along all year showing that we haven't applied for the grants.
Right. Yeah, and I can certainly put a footnote on there.
Department, what do you say to that? Does it not make sense?
We could put a note on there. The other thing you could do is you could adjust the budget. So, you know what I mean? If the expectation changed, we could just go back and adjust the budget so that we're not every month looking at explaining this change because it was something that we made a conscious decision. We're going to do this differently. We could also amend the budget just so it's clear. Either that or a footnote, either one would work.
We could, and for all practical purposes, we still have the flexibility on that reimbursement to put it back into our operating budget and just show it right on budget and then kind of make that decision even at the end of the year. But we know we have the flexibility now, so we just went ahead and did it. But we'll certainly look at a couple of approaches.
Would work, I think, and like Chris is saying, it would make it clear. Either we change the budget, and so the number looks like what we're anticipating, how we're anticipating to work, or we put the footnote at the bottom. Either one would work.
Well, we had this problem a good number of years ago, not applying for the grants in a timely fashion, and I don't want us to look like our financials here, that we've now got ourselves back into that same situation where we're not applying for the grants in a timely fashion. Right. And it was a real difficult situation a good number of years ago, and I don't think the trustees need to look at this on a monthly basis and say, oh, now here we are right back in the same situation.
Right. Okay. And then I think the last comment on the transit financial would just be supplies continue to be under budget. And you'll notice we're at about 75% of what we would expect. 276,000 of that savings is attributable to fuel. So we're about 59 cents a gallon under budget on fuel. On the next page here, page 3, looking at the parking system report, again, starting with the revenues, we're actually showing to be at about 90% of what our budgeted revenues were. And again, as a reminder, that's due in part to the Century Center opening a little bit later than what we had planned, and the fact that the Arts District Garage was not open at the first of the fiscal year. What I will say, though, is we've closed that gap on the difference between revenues received versus revenues expected. When we looked at our financials last month, our gap was $615,000. Now we're at $536,000. So we're closing that gap. And in fact, I believe it was in February, our contractual revenue, the revenue we received from monthly parkers, was actually about 2% over budget. So that's kind of a sign of all of our garages are back open and they're filling back up. And then on the expenditure side, we continue to remain under budget on our expenses. Other services and fees is where we're seeing most of our savings. That's primarily our budget with Republic for managing the garages, along with contingency and some budget for any unplanned needed capital repairs for the garages. Looking down towards the bottom of the report, if you'll just under the debt service section, you'll see a line, total excess of revenues over expenditures. And I want to point this out because although our revenues are under budget, so are our expenses, and so what we end up with is still excess of revenues over expenditures through 8 months of $750,000. So again, even though our revenues are not coming in expected, they are outpacing our expenses, and you can see that there. And then looking at the river financials, again, very similar to what we looked at last month. In particular, we haven't operated service, so we wouldn't expect things to change a lot. On revenues, we continue to be about 65% of our budget. We would expect our revenues to start picking up now as we begin service in April. And then on total operating expenditures, you can see that overall, looking at the other services and fees and the supplies categories, we are actually at about 99 or right on budget with our expenditures. But again, as I mentioned last month, we're working with HMS to reconcile the expenditures for the 2014 contract year end, and looking at some of the expenses we had, some of the more major maintenance expenses for the boats, we're looking at probably having to pay an additional $80,000 in maintenance expenses that you do not see in this report. And again, we're continuing to work with HMS to basically verify those numbers. What we will do to fund that is, again, some of the savings that we have on the transit side of our operations could go to support that additional expenditure. So we'll have more information for you next month on that. And then I'll be glad to answer any questions.
All right. Any questions? Do you also want to cover the interim financials for 6 months? Or
Yeah, the interim only goes through December, so I think the information I just shared is much more current.
Do I hear a motion to receive our financial reports? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Our program reports. Our first is our transit system report. We've heard all about it from the survey, so.
Thank you very much. Yes, I appreciate that. Good morning. Thank you very much for having us. I'd like to touch on 4 topics regarding the transit report for February 2015. 3 topics, pardon me. Safety, ridership, and on-time performance. I'm pleased to report that we had our goal, 0% preventative accidents during the month of February. Now, we experienced 5 non-preventable accidents, 4 of which occurred on February 23rd, which, if you recall, was a horrendous weather day. During the month of February, we conducted our quarterly safety multi-hour programs to all operators. At these meetings, we introduced a new training tool, which was devised by our safety officer, I'm very proud of, which included actual clips of preventable accidents, so that the participants, all viewers, had a bird's eye view of exactly what transpired as if they were sitting in the seat. These were taken by the cameras that are on our buses. It was dramatic to watch, and dramatic to watch the operators themselves, as in a flight simulator, experiencing the accident without suffering the consequences, and also then learning the items that would prevent the reoccurrence of that accident. Now, this innovative training tool and our constant and ongoing comprehensive training program for our new drivers and our existing drivers, plus our focus on safety, will continue to manifest itself in reduced preventable accidents, which we pointed out is the most important thing we do. Ridership. We passed the fiscal year-to-date 2 million passenger benchmark in February, which was a month earlier than in the previous year. Now, if you take a look at the daily ridership slide, please, you'll see that the daily ridership was 10,620 passengers in our fixed route service for the month of February 2015, compared to 9,475 in the previous month. Now, this is a 10.08% increase, which is in line with the 10.55% increase that we experienced in January year over year of 2015. Now, we attribute this increase to the service enhancements, to respectable on-time performance, and to the introduction of late-night service, which we had 5 days worth in January of 2015. February was our first full month, and I'm delighted to say that we served in night service 2,289 passengers. As was pointed out, 73% of those passengers depend on us to get to work, and this expanded their ability to do that in many other places. February was it also resulted in 114 citizens per night that rode our buses, but there were a couple of days that were in excess of 150. With Mr. Scroggins' behavior, or Mr. Scroggins' assistance, I think we're going to achieve relatively quickly. Now, I'd like to note that we experienced a 34% decline in the Saturday downtown Discovery service. Now, this was mostly attributed to the fact that one of the Saturdays was very bad weather. Monday through Friday, for instance, of downtown Discovery was up year over year by 2.5%. That's it for me. Thank you for your time. I'll be pleased to answer, provide additional questions, or do my best to. Did I do that right?
Kevin, can we look at the on-time performance, or can you mention that?
Oh yeah, we didn't. Oh yeah, no, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, pardon me. Let's talk about on-time performance, which is a good measurement. It was 72.7%. Sorry about that. Which is a 20% increase from July of 2014. Which Trustee Johnson, I appreciated, pointed out that's when the survey was conducted, and I suspect that 20% increase in on-time performance will manifest itself in a similar increase in customer satisfaction. We did have month over month from January to February a decrease of approximately 3%, and we attribute that to the fact that we had 5 bad weather days in February 2015 compared to 3 in January 2015. So I mean it this time. Thank you for
What's the criteria for the on-time performance? 5 minutes either way?
Well, it was 1 minute before or less than 1 minute before. We should never leave because someone will be there, and up to 5 minutes afterwards. And every single bus stop, there are 1,200, some of them, are measured by that. And here's another quick thing, is that we don't have an adjustment for when there is a bad weather day, of which there were 5. And our instructions to our drivers, and they're very clear, is that on-time performance totally goes out the window if we are under circumstances that would force us to achieve it by compromising safety. So it's a mark that can be further refined.
I just think that on-time performance is a critical factor in attracting those choice riders that Councilman Greenwell talks about, that when it comes to that reliability is very important to them. So.
Ms. Johnson, you're absolutely right. Not only that, but the people who use us, the 73%, need our on-time performance to get to work. And we'll just pull out absolutely all the stops. If, for instance, there's a detour and we have to go around the trains, which cause us grief from time to time, the road supervisors will jump in their little vans and actually go grab the people that would be inconvenienced by that detour. We understand how important it is to our citizens to make it to work on time. But thank you for pointing out that.
How close are we, and I don't know the terminology, but for the GPS, or I mean the systems on the bus where, that's what?
Yeah.
ABL, thank you.
Yes, Chairman, we have a road supervisor, and it's great. You can watch the buses exactly where they are and exactly what their deviation is from the on-time performance. And we have a road supervisor at all times, as like a quarterback, watching those all buses in action and actually dispatching replacement buses or road soups or whatever if we see that there is a lag of greater than 5 minutes.
It's fully implemented on
It's
all
a
the
wonder
buses.
passengers even can know when where the bus is and when to get there if they want to get on there.
I believe so.
Yeah, for the major stops that are in the schedule, they can receive a text alert of when the bus will be there. And Michael can speak more to it during his presentation. But we are working, if we haven't already accomplished it, in providing live data to Google so that with our journey planner or trip planning, they can't actually see where the bus is.
I think that's what I'm referring to.
Okay.
Not very high tech on this, but hear you all talk about it. So.
Yeah, we're very, very close, if not testing it
All
out.
right, good. All right, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Long range, or no, you can talk to parking,
Make sure I was
I guess.
As you can see in your report for February, our vacancy rate is at, or our occupancy rate is at 103%. I do want to just point out on, especially at the Arts District and Century Center, those numbers are changing. The Arts District now, we're like up to 650 as far as monthly spaces sold, and then the Century Center, that is also increased. So you'll see that in the next coming months where that's going to start leveling out. We're going to be pulling some from the Cox that will be going back into the Century Center, so those will start, the occupancy by garage will start leveling out a little bit more than they are right now. And just to kind of update you on construction, we already talked about some of it today. Sheridan Walker, we're redoing the deck on the top. That is almost finished. We've asked the contractor to be finished by Arts Festival, since that's a very busy time for that garage. And the Santa Fe elevators, that work is progressing very nicely. They have shut down the south lobbies for those elevator replacements, so notices were sent out to all the parkers. They are using the main north elevator lobbies for right now. And then with the Arts District, with the approval of the contract today, I get to start wearing my hard hat again. We'll be doing the retail build-out, so we'll be working on that, and I'll be giving you updates on that as well.
Will we be prioritizing parts of that build-out
Yes.
to accommodate the people who've already got a
Yes.
signed lease?
Yes,
Okay.
and actually we put them in.
Because the October timeline worried me a little bit.
Yeah, we put them in order, then that's why we separated them out like that, because like the employee clinic, the permits will be by space, so that we can finish one before moving to the other and get approval,
Great.
occupancy approval from that. So. And then on the city side, just to let you know, we recently purchased with TIF funds an additional 50 of the multi-space meters, and we installed some 2 weeks ago, and we're also installing 6 today in the areas that they've just finished on the Project 180. So just to kind of update you on that side of it. And with that, if there are any questions.
We get all this done, what are you going to do the rest of the year now?
I'm going to be working on retail build-out, I guess.
Oh, okay, all right.
I know, I think our garages are going to be in very good condition with all the work we've done on them recently. So.
How's the retail space at Santa Fe? What's kind of an update on that?
The retail space, we still have, the convenience store that's on that far north end. Red Earth has requested additional space, so they are freeing up about 800 square feet that's on that corner. So we'll have that available, and I'll be probably putting the word out on that. And then the OU Health Science Center and UCO, but small business, and Trigen are still, or Viola is still in there.
And we've finished all the
Yes, that's been
construction, and
finished.
everything, all on the retail?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Debbie. All right, marketing, now what, you've got me confused. Is this
Well, we have a transit
long-range
system.
planning? Okay.
Yeah, we have a transit system report, which is a lot of the data and insights about what's happening, and then planning, and we have all the other reports as well.
I need names for this, who's giving the report, so I know the order here.
Yeah, planning report. Yeah, there really are four items to kind of mention this month, and the first is about, part of what we did with the Open Streets activity with one of the nonprofits in town. That Open Streets event was such a great event, and we helped with a group called the Alliance for Public Transportation that had put a U-pedal-it bus out there on that deal, where people would get on board, maybe 12, 15 people, and they would pedal this vehicle for a couple of blocks, and while there, they'd learn about public transportation and the like. And, a lot of people liked that. It was a great event overall, on the whole street. But what was perhaps best about it is that those folks, I think, came to understand more about transit and, to some extent, that kind of a fun message that basically, the more you pedal, the faster this grows kind of a deal. So it was a good thing, and I think they even had a banner on there about APTA's Stand Up for Transportation Day. But really kind of talking about the other things about streetcar, really not a lot to say right now. There's been a tremendous amount of activity that Cotpa and MAPS have been involved in, but with the preliminary design report coming out in a couple of weeks, there'll just be a tremendous amount of information about the planning basically for getting ready for operations. What I want to focus a little bit more on is how we're sort of shifting in planning to a second front, not just this effort to kind of help with streetcar, but now really with this idea of the Northwest Rapid Transit Corridor concept plan. And, you already know a little bit about that, but basically it is that corridor that starts downtown, would go out basically Classen Boulevard and out the Northwest Expressway, out past Integris. And, it's just a concept plan, but yet it's really kind of that next sort of logical step from what was recommended in your 2030 fixed guideway plan. And so basically what's happening on this project is that instead of Cotpa just trying to kind of lead and manage this on its own, it's really kind of working, you might consider it kind of, locking arms with the Oklahoma City Planning Department, also the planners with ACOG and with City County Health, to kind of have sort of a kind of a unified approach by those four. And really that should really amplify the overall, impact and the ability to kind of get good input on that. That group actually had its first focus group meeting of about a dozen or 15 entities just last week, and basically you have a lot of the kind of usual suspects that are governmental and nonprofit entities, but also folks from Integris Health, from N Square and Simon Properties, American Fidelity, Chamber, and OCU, because these are really kind of key institutions and companies in that corridor. So that was a good kickoff, and as you remember, that corridor has been selected as one of 5 in the U.S. for the healthy planning approach, and that type of a healthy planning approach will basically be threaded throughout. I think it's called the Public Health and Transportation Corridor Planning Framework. So we'll be using that. Also, we're in the process, based on your item of last month, of getting that agreement finalized with the OU Institute for Quality Communities to kind of provide some technical assistance in the back of all 4 of us entities. And again, it's concept planning, but it's actually a great next step. And then the only final thing I'd mention is last week, well, in that corridor, what the fixed guideway plan was really suggesting was some type of bus rapid transit, something that's not like the service or the frequency or the type of stops we have today, but something that's really quite different. And last week OU had put on it was a placemaking and planning conference attended by about 400 or 500 folks, and at that they featured a speaker named Gil Peñalosa, And Gil, he and his brother, I guess, were elected officials in a city that's really done a lot with bus rapid transit. He did a good presentation on that topic and came to Oklahoma City and also did a similar presentation. So kind of with that, that's the planning report for March.
Met with ACOG on the regional transit dialogue. Anything come out of that, or what was the purpose of the meeting? Or
Well, the Finance and Governance Committee met, and Jason may want to try to answer that question.
Sure, I think, the regional transit dialogue continues, and I think where that group is at now is essentially looking at how do we take this this concept that's on paper and actually start creating an authority with people involved managing that process of putting it together. And so that was really the topic of the meeting, is what are the next steps, what communities would be involved and have a seat at that table and be contributed or be asked to contribute to supporting that next phase.
because, I mean, a lot of work was done, a good number, several years ago, about trying to develop, what it would look like, and I don't know if any of that's still applicable to what they're looking at now, or is it kind of started all over, or?
No, I believe, I've been connected with it over the last year or so, and it's, I believe it's very similar to the first round, the RTD, and now they have RTD2. But I think, if everything comes together as what the group had planned and discussed, there, could potentially be that authority at least formed maybe as early as next year. I mean, there's a lot of things to put together, but that's kind of the goal of the group. Where it goes from there, is still to be determined.
Well, as you know, this was one of my key initiatives many years ago, and would certainly like to see it keep going, because I think it's somewhere we need to be, so.
Yep, it is definitely moving along.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask Larry to expand just a little bit on Gil Penalosa's presentation? He is a former elected official and continues to work with cities throughout the world. Many of them have severe transportation problems. The population continues to grow, and the cities were originally designed to probably not accommodate the number of automobiles, and so to overcome that, they really do shift the focus from passenger automobiles to public transportation to help minimize that problem. And then he took it a step further, and in connection with your presentation on the open streets events, he spoke of the benefits of providing similar type of environment in, say, a downtown type area, and we may look into that. The benefits that could be achieved by that to do an open streets activity in the downtown area is, one, get people in the downtown area more accustomed to an environment where the automobile is not so active, improve the retail activity of the downtown district, make walking or biking much more enjoyable and comfortable, and hopefully increase the awareness of the importance of public transportation and help reduce the demand for public parking downtown. I know that kind of works against us, but if we can increase public transportation, the demand for parking down here is going to decrease. Can you just share any thoughts that you have, either from the placemaking conference or a couple of days later when ULI sponsored a luncheon presentation?
Well, let me try to be brief. What you said is very true. He had pointed out all the things you mentioned about the value of bus rapid transit and the ability to build it more quickly, and how it really can help in a lot of different cities. I think his experience was really in a South American city, but yet what seems to be happening all over our country is, whether it's in California or Texas or wherever, some type of premium bus service, is really becoming much more commonly built, whether it's Florida or wherever. But I think he also talked about trying to elevate, I guess, the whole respect for the pedestrian and the person riding the bus. I think he had some type of a comment about bus stops and the need to make them to where they're safer and more dignified places to wait. I think that was a theme he had made a couple of times. But he talked a lot about the bus rapid transit and how they kind of went from a kind of a small system to making it much larger. And the ciclovia, I think, is the concept you're talking about in terms of pedestrian. I think in some cities, and apparently now LA is doing this once a month, they have areas where I think like one Sunday a month, there may be an area of many linear miles where basically there are no cars, but people can get out there and ride, skateboard, et cetera, et cetera. It's been a great community unifying event, the ciclovia, and that really, I think, was the spark of what really kind of led to the Open Streets event last year, and I think an event on Southwest 29th here as well. So he kind of promoted that concept as a way to get people out, more active, having fun, and I think he gave many examples, everything from Times Square in New York and others, about how trying to make more room for the pedestrian, we're kind of regardless of the climate, has been a way to humanize cities, make them more livable, add to transportation options. So does that kind of match with some of the things that you heard,
Yeah,
Trustee?
exactly. Very, very good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right, our marketing.
Good morning. Appreciate you bearing with us this morning. We had quite a few items to cover with you. Just real quick, I wanted to thank John and Randy Ants and Aubrey Hammondtree from the Planning Department for undertaking the survey that they did. I mean, it's a huge effort that they put forth, and I think it shows, the great interest they have in bettering our city and community, and at the same time partnering with us to improve our services as well. So a huge thank you to them. This Thursday, we have April 9th, which is April 9th, we have Stand Up for Transportation Day. That is a day that is being promoted through the American Public Transportation Association, and what they are trying to do is increase the awareness and the importance of infrastructure for public transportation. One of the efforts that we're making locally is to invite our state legislators to our South May facility in order to help them understand our operations, the services that we provide to our community, and to also help them understand what the infrastructure really is. I think sometimes there's a disconnect when they think of public transportation and infrastructure. So this will give us hopefully an opportunity. We've reached out and extended invitations, and we're planning hopefully to have those briefings set up throughout that day, as well as being able to just help them better understand what we do and how they could help us do a better job at doing that with their support. What we're also looking to do is on April 19th, the Southwest 29th Street Business Association, they're doing, this is their third annual event, where it's the Festival of Children. And it's a huge holiday in Mexico. And it's a very important holiday because it puts the focus, again, on children and the youth. They expect to have anywhere from 15 to 20,000 in participation that day. That is a Sunday. While we will not this year have a presence there with a bus, we will participate in the future. We will be on a survey that they're doing, that they're requiring to get the goodie bags and those things. And the benefit of that is that hopefully that will help us understand what John showed us in the results, that we have an underrepresentation of the Hispanic population here in Oklahoma City. And some of the questions we're putting on there is to help guide and try to better understand what either barriers are or if there's a perception issue along with that. So just hopefully those results will be coming early this summer, but just want to make you aware that we are participating in that way. You asked about the AVL. We are working to continue to develop different portions of that and to make sure that those are accessible. Another aspect of that, though, that is critical is the bus stop itself, and we have a round of information that will be installed throughout the summer on those bus stops so that it'll inform you on how, if you're there at the stop, on how to access that information. We're finding from talking with our partner agencies around the country that most people wait until they get to the stop to go, oh, well, no, I need this, I need to know this. So we're trying to get all of that. It's in production. It just then would need to go out for installation. And I just wanted to share just a few photos with you of our day at Open Streets. So they expected that there's an excess of 20,000 there that day. I'm not sure if any of you had the opportunity to attend, but this is, I believe, a portion of that 23rd Street there. It's almost a mile was closed down. We were positioned at the Northwest 23rd and Western, the very far west end. We were pretty much at the barricade to get out if you wanted, if you were heading that direction. One of the great things about that day is, and it speaks to, because a lot of these folks here are choice riders, but we are able to conduct and allow people to have that kind of touch a truck experience that, you know, elementaries do, of where you actually go on the bus and you get to experience what it's like. You see the cleanliness, see all the amenities that are on there. Now, we don't make it that easy, though. You actually start at the beginning. You have to go to each station. You see how to pay your fare. We show you where people with a person with a disability and or seniors, we try to preserve that space for them. And then we also talk to them about how do you request to stop by pulling the cord. And then we show them how we'd like for them to exit out the rear if possible, because we want to maintain that flow of efficiency with people boarding at the front. So we had more than 500 actually touch the bus, get on the bus, walk through it. And we had even more that came up to our table where we were handing out these nice little shades. And I've got some here for you if you'd like one. But these were a very popular item that day, and it just allowed us to, again, interact with the public, have conversations about the changes that were being made, and to discuss the future as well. And, of course, we had a lot of fun. This is a few of them. Jeannie wasn't here. She was down at our Spokey station, and I'm just going to bow out and let her tell you a little bit about that in just a minute. But I would be happy to answer any questions real quick if you have any.
Any questions, Michael? That looked like fun.
It was a lot of fun. It's always fun. All right. Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, with Smokies, we have a mobile station that we can take to events to help promote bike share and bike riding in general. So we stationed the mobile Smoky station at Northwest 23rd and Walker for this Open Streets event. We had free rides within the event as a way to introduce the service. Many of our event goers stopped by to learn about the service or to take a bike ride through the event. Others stopped by basically to get their personal bike tires reinflated. That was fine, too. We got to meet more bicycle riders. And many of the attendees expressed a desire for us to put a permanent station on 23rd Street. Lots of people said, oh, can you leave this here? You know, we thought, well, it's a long ride to 10th, but maybe someday. All in all, staff had the opportunity to talk with residents about bicycles as an alternate transportation option. The mobile station gives us this opportunity, and we have other events planned. Brent with Bicycle Transit Systems has been talking with several entities about programs that they have going on and opportunities for us to introduce bike share to other parts of the city in the hopes that someday we'll be able to grow out from the city and expand into other areas. And that's all I have for Smokies. As far as River, today is the opening day for ferry service. Previous years, we would just run Exchange to Regatta and back as a preliminary warm-up to the season. This year, we actually made plans to go out to Meridian because of the increased interest out there with the increased hotels. And HMS does a wonderful job of staying in touch with those people and keeping them aware of our service and when we're available. Unfortunately, with the recent rains that we've had, a significant amount of debris has collected at the May Dam, and we won't be able to go to Meridian until Public Works has an opportunity to clear that debris. We hope it will only delay that service for this weekend, but we'll see how it goes. It was a significant amount of trees and brush that were in that basin. And but we are running service to the from Exchange to the Regatta Park and the Bricktown landings beginning today, and through the weekends in April, and then in May we'll take it back to Wednesday through Sunday. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So we're all hooked up with Bricktown and ready to go, and
Good deal. I have water taxi
Got
tickets
water
on board
taxis.
for you. Yeah,
okay. All right, thank you, Gina.
thank you.
All right. Do I hear a motion to receive our program reports? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Items from the trustee. Jason had one item he'd like to discuss with us just a minute.
Thank you. I wanted to just mention that we celebrated National Transit Driver Appreciation Day on March 18th. And wanted to just talk a little bit about that, in that we worked really hard as an administrative staff to try to get out there and get in front of our customers, give our customers an opportunity not only on the buses but at the transit center to, just be able to recognize operators that they wanted to for a job well done. And so wanted to thank the administrative staff. Just about everybody in this room participated, I believe, and rode a bus or either spent some time at the transit center along with many others. And we collected these little cards where customers could actually write comments, and we'll be passing these along to the operators. We're still currently, collecting a few. Some people wanted us to leave them, and they'd fill them out and turn them in. But it was a good way to recognize the job that the operators do on a daily basis, and appreciate the admin staff for helping us facilitate that.
All right, thank you. All right, anything any of the other trustees would like to mention? Okay.
On this survey, is there any place that you could find out when they first started riding the bus? If they're, I don't see any.
Use your microphone, okay? You turned it on.
Could we include also when people started riding the bus? And that question I don't think is on there, was it? So we kind of know whether they were new riders or have been riding forever?
We did have the answer on the frequency question, that they could say, this is my first time riding, but we didn't have a question that asked each individual when they first started riding.
I just thought that might be.
It might be, yeah. So we could see what percentage are new.
I think with the next, we're working on another survey, and we can certainly put that in the pool of questions for consideration. Absolutely. We always come up with a list of questions and have to kind of narrow it down to what's a reasonable length survey, but I think we can certainly consider that one.
David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have been noticing a lot of naked buses lately. Are we in a, not the people on the buses, grow up, just buses that don't seem to even have the Embark logo on them. Are we in the process of changing some out?
Yes. Two things. One, we have lost some of our wraps, so that, they lost the wraps. Even though our advertising revenue is still continuing to be above target. And so Kevin and I, we visited about that actually maybe it was a week ago, about starting to address some of those buses that the wraps have came off, and now some of them still have the Metro Transit sticker. That's going away. Michael and I and Melissa were in discussions this week actually, and we're looking at wrapping with the Embark logo 5 more of our fixed route buses. So yes, we did recognize that once we lost some of those wraps and they came off, and we're working to fix that.
Greg? Nope. All right. Well, thank you for everybody's participation, and I think it was a pretty informative meeting to learn a few new things. And with that, I will say we're adjourned. Thank you.